Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I am very happy to be joined by Kentucky Secretary of State Michael Adams for an important announcement. I want to recognize former council member and now Assistant Secretary of State Jennifer Scutchfield, who worked with us on this grant that we're announcing today. Welcome home, Jenny. And she and I served together on the Urban County Council. Secretary Adams came into office in January of 2020, and little did he know, just a few months later, he would face a pandemic and the challenge it placed on a local, state, and national election cycle. I think we can all agree that working in a bipartisan spirit with Governor Andy Beshear, Secretary Adams led our state to very successful and secure primary and general elections in 2020. I'd like to welcome Secretary Adams to the podium. Welcome. Get this on.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Great to be with you all this morning. Today is a red letter day for elections in Kentucky. At 10 a.m. this morning, Governor Beshear signed into law House Bill 574, the most significant election reform law in our state since 1891. Literally, the horse and buggy era is the last time that we revisited our election system. That bill makes 7 significant changes. It expands the days to go vote from 1 day to 4. 4 convenient days to vote, including a Saturday for the first time in Kentucky history, something that's great for working people. It provides for vote centers so that voters can vote conveniently at a central location, regardless of where they live in their county. It keeps the absentee ballot request portal that works so well in 2020. It keeps the cure process that helps us ensure that voters aren't disenfranchised because their signature looks different today than it did 20 or 30 years ago when they registered to vote. It also allows for us to take further steps to clean up our voter rolls. It's very important to have clean and accurate voter rolls. It bans ballot harvesting. We actually saw an election in North Carolina for U.S. Congress overturned just 2 years ago due to ballot harvesting. They couldn't tell who actually won that election fair and square. And lastly, that bill provides for Kentucky to move universally to paper ballots that we count electronically, all the speed of a quick count with the security of a paper trail. And so that was all just at 10 a.m. this morning. Now it's 11:30 and we have even more to offer today. I'm very pleased to announce that through a grant arranged through a joint partnership of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the Kentucky Office of Homeland Security, the Office of the Secretary of State, and the Lexington Fayette County Urban Government, we are now providing for devices to be allocated at no cost to our county clerks, providing for 2-factor authentication for all logins to the statewide voter registration system. One of the issues I discussed when I was a candidate for this office was my sense that we need to enhance cybersecurity. Obviously, we've done a lot in the last 15 months to make it easier to vote and harder to cheat, but cybersecurity is an issue you can never take your eye off the ball on. My predecessor labored on that issue, and I have as well. About a year ago, we were approached by the Kentucky Office of Homeland Security, part of the Beshear administration. They had access to federal grant monies that could be used to improve our election process, and they sought input from our office about how exactly to do that. Especially with Assistant Secretary Jennifer Scutchfield leading the effort. We've worked with the federal government, with the state government, and with the local government here to provide for this to actually become a reality. Here's what it is in English. There are approximately 800 people around the state that have a login access to our voter registration system. Again, at no charge, we're going to be providing devices that provide for 2-factor authentication. The same sort of security that we see in the private sector, we're now finally bringing to our election process. The local government here in Lexington was our first choice to actually administer this grant. The restrictions of this grant at the federal level are that they have to be allocated to and utilized by a local government. This is for a local improvement, not for a statewide body such as my office. So we worked in partnership with Mayor Gorton for the past year to work this out. Mayor Gorton and her government were our first choice for the right county to have the professionalism and competence to implement this program. And so although this is a statewide program that will benefit all 120 counties and their clerks and their logins, it's going to be orchestrated by Mayor Gorton and her team. And so I just want to say how grateful I am for the multi-agency, multi-level, bipartisan cooperation that's led to this great outcome for Kentuckians. I want to thank the governor and his Office of Homeland Security for approaching us with this option. I want to thank Mayor Gorton for actually getting this done at the ground level and implemented. And I especially want to thank Assistant Secretary Scutchfield for being the prime mover on this for the past year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Adams. 2020, of course, was a demanding year for everyone. We had a pandemic that turned the world on its head at times, but we also had local, state, and national elections, and holding elections during a pandemic forced us to think differently about how we voted. I'm very proud of Kentucky, and especially proud of Lexington, as we had safe, secure elections. We worked closely with Fayette County Clerk Don Blevins Jr. to provide ballot drop-off locations, a secure vote counting location, an online feed of activity which our citizens could access, and extensive communications to let everyone know about the changes. Voting was accessible and convenient more than ever before, and it was very successful. We can always continue to think critically and creatively, and this is a great example of that. And I'm happy to join Secretary Adams, along with several state offices and agencies, to enhance our election system safety. By having county clerks use this new device, I believe it's called YubiKey, our election data and infrastructure will be more secure from third-party unauthorized access. So I thank you all very much, and now we're happy to take any questions that you might have.
Mr. Secretary, two quick ones. The enhancements of security, is it because something was not secure during the last wave?
The question is, are we improving security because we were not secure previously? That's always, I think, the risk in making things better is it begs the question of were they good enough already? I want to reassure all Kentuckians that our elections are secure. They were secure before I took office. They're secure now, but there's always more that we can do. This is about risk assessment. Just because something hasn't happened doesn't mean that it couldn't happen in the future. So we've not had our system hacked. Our elections are secure. The election of the last governor, I presided along with the then Secretary of State and gave it my own sign off at her invitation. This is how it should be done, in a bipartisan way that respects the voters' wishes. And so we can always do more than we're doing. We can always improve, and we'll keep doing that.
Other questions?
What will the absentee or mail-in process look like going forward? Because obviously, even when we were not in the throes of a pandemic, that's popular.
Well, last year we did not have no excuse absentee. We had COVID excuse absentee. COVID was a really good reason to give people the option to vote remotely. But even in a pandemic, we saw that 70% of our voters wanted to vote in person. That's just our tradition and our culture. And we respect that. We made that easier, both through emergency powers last year and now through this legislation this morning. I have no beef with absentee voting. I've been absentee voting since my first election in 1994. I think it's great. I think it's a great option. But I also understand that it's twice as expensive to have an absentee ballot versus an in-person ballot, and stuff ain't free. And I don't want to ask the legislature or the governor to cut health care or education to provide mail-in ballots to able-bodied people. So the best way we found to expand the franchise in the most efficient manner was to expand in-person voting. We did not take away anyone's absentee voting rights. I think we'll have a healthy use of that part of our system. I think it's been incentivized by the portal and the cure process. So however you want to vote, go vote. We've never made it easier than it's been effective today.
Michael, where does the threat come from for this security, for the need for this security?
Well, I don't want to concede that there is a live threat, but in theory, just as with you logging into your bank, I assume, asked you for two-factor authentication. They probably text your cell phone. This is the equivalent of that, except us, instead of using the cell phones of the staffs of the county clerk's offices, instead the code is sent to the YubiKey device. So this is just a precaution. It's sort of like photo ID to vote. We had no actual instances we were aware of impersonation, but we thought it was a theoretical possibility. It was worth taking action on it.
Not about a domestic or a foreign threat.
It's not one versus the other in particular. I would say in terms of threat, the biggest form of that threat that this would address is any third party having unauthorized access. And whether that would be someone who's a foreign agent or someone who's a domestic instigator or even someone with a campaign trying to tinker with the results. This is really blind as to who the identity of that person would be or their specific motive. It just keeps those people from getting into the system.
Other questions?
Secretary, could you give any specific examples of types of events that this type of security has prevented in the country at some point? Or
I don't have personal knowledge of attempts in other states and this implementation in other states. To me, it's just sort of a no-brainer that we ought to have the same security on our elections that we have on our banking and all the other things that we do on a daily basis. We ought to at least be at that level.
Other questions? What else?
Why do you suppose election reform in other states, which I won't name, has become such a hot-button issue, but here it's been a lot more tame?
Well, that's not an accident. It's by design. That's how I've chosen to comport myself in this office, and I had a willing partner in the governor doing the same thing. I said last year that the biggest mistake that Ohio and Wisconsin and other states made, they weren't incompetent in administration. The problem was they didn't have bipartisan consensus to work together to solve problems, and you had a Democratic governor in Wisconsin and a Republican legislature suing each other. It went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and people in Wisconsin who wanted to vote didn't know until the night before the election what the rules were going to be. People got disenfranchised, and actually some people got sick, got COVID. You had polling sites open and closed and so forth. It was a disaster, but it was a human disaster. It was a disaster caused by humans. My goal, after having seen that happen, was to keep it from happening here. And that's why I asked the legislature to pass new emergency powers, not just for me, but for the governor too, so that we would have to jointly turn the key to make any change. They passed that on a bipartisan basis. Then they gave the authority to us, and we worked in a bipartisan way to achieve our shared objectives of a safe and secure election. So I'd say the difference is it's not an accident, it's by design. It's just our legislators of both parties, our governor and me, have all intentionally worked in a bipartisan way. And I think it leads not just to a better policy, but also a better process and more confidence of all the electorate that the rules are fair and legitimate.
Anything else? Other questions? All right, thank you all so much.
Thank you all.